Akan saya membuat video menyimak tentang tugas 14, yaitu Alex Hooks Explainer Magnetic Hooks Tutorial 2020. Langsung saja, let's go.
How's it going? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video I'm going to be teaching you guys every single React hook. If you're familiar with my channel, I have a video already on this. It's actually my most successful video so far on my channel, and the reason why I wanted to remake this is because that video was made 3 years ago and I didn't even cover every single hook, and as of 2020, the fundamental building blocks of a React application. Now, the example I want to use for the state here is the most simple example that I believe is used for describing states, which is the idea of building a counter. So in this component over here, I'm going to put a div, which is going to wrap a p tag, so a paragraph tag, which is going to display some number, which is going to be the count. Then we want to have a button over here, which is going to interact with that number by increasing its value. So we'll say increase counter. Now, we currently have no way to store that number for the count, and we have no functions to call when you click the button. Before we create any state, let's just do it how we would normally do with a normal variable, as if you were playing around with JavaScript. I'll create a constant over here. Actually, I'll create a normal variable that can be altered, and I'll say count is equal to 0. And then I'll pass this value over here by passing count. Perfect. You see, now we see the count being 0. On this button over here, I'll create a variable called increase count. And inside of here, we're going to put some logic to increase the count and pass this increase count as the on click to this button. Perfect. Now, normally speaking, if I want to make this variable go up, right, this value go up by 1 each time, what I could technically do is do count plus or equals 1. But you'll see that this doesn't work. Now, it technically increases the value. If I were to console log over here the value of count, you'll see that in our console over here, it should technically, when I click the first time, show 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. So the variable count is indeed changing. But why aren't we seeing that change over here? Well, because if you were using vanilla JavaScript, what you would do now is you would directly grab whatever p tag is displaying this number and change its value to represent the variable. But we're not doing that. We're using React, where our DOM needs to be updated and re-rendered automatically depending how the state of our application is. So this is the idea of a state. A state, in its most simplest form, is just a variable that you can create and change its value. And when its value is changed, it will automatically trigger a re-render of your page to demonstrate the new value. So how do we create one? Well, the way you do it is like this. You say const and then set an open and closing square brackets. Then you set it equal to the useState hook. It should automatically import it from React. Then we open and close parentheses, and you'll see that most hooks will look a similar way. Now, what do you put over here? Well, you put the initial value of what you want your state to be. So in this case, count starts at 0, so we can put 0 over here. But this, you could also pass an empty string if your state represents a string, or even an object if that's the case as well. So we'll keep it as 0. And what do we put inside of here? Well, with the way that the useState hook is defined, and you can look at it if you want to, this should return back inside of here 2 things. The first is the value of your state, which is being called, you can call it whatever you want, let's call it count. And then it is a function that you can use to alter the state. So we're going to call this set count. Usually it has this notation with set in front and then usually the name of the state. But why do we need a function to change it? Because although this count variable is actually working similar to how it was before when we were using let, you'll see that altering the value of it by just increasing it like this doesn't work. Because what you have to do is use this setCount function and mutate the value inside of it. So we'll replace this over here and we'll open and close parentheses to call this setCount function. Now what do I mean by mutating this value? Well, this function inside of here, it allows you to have a callback function inside of it. So a function that gives you access to the previous value of the state. So if count is 0 initially, the first time we call this prev value over here will be equal to 0. Now if we increase it by 1, the next time prev will be equal to 1. So what we return is alteration. If we wanted to decrease it, we could subtract or multiply or do whatever we want with this. But in our case, we want to just add it. And by doing this, we'll ensure that we're altering our state in the correct way and thus making React actually trigger a re-render because it is using the value of that state increasing. Now, one cool thing that helps you understand more about the React lifecycle is looking at our old console log, this thing over here, right? If we go over here, we see that initially it's supposed to be 0, and we're not console logging initially. We only console log when we click increase count. So we are setting the count to be equal to 1 over here as the first touch of the button, and then we're console logging. So you should assume that when I click on this button, we should see 1 because it increases by 1 and then it shows 1. But you'll see that it's always lagged behind. It seems like it will always be 1 behind, even though it's after the set count. And the reason for that is because we're console logging before the page decides to re-render to show the new state value. And thus, the state actually only changes value after it's done running this increase count function. So keep that in mind. If you were to do set count over here twice, you'll see what will happen over here. It increases by 2 each time, but it also lags behind on both of them.